ecovillages in particular are like research labs, socially and culturally and ecologically and economically, for what our culture will need to grow more towards in the future.
One thing that you could do is like wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and let the world's pain and suffering enter into you. And what really breaks your heart, is the thing that will sustain you, and that is what you ought to be doing.
This is Peak Moment. We are living at a peak of human innovation, information, wealth, and health. But we're also at a peak of population and consumption, with rising temperatures and declining resources fueled by cheap oil and gas. Peak Moment Television, bringing you examples of positive responses to energy decline and climate change through local community action.
Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. I'm in the community gardens at the Nevada City Co-Housing here in Nevada City, California, and my guest has something to say about intentional communities, of which this is one. My guest is Diana Leaf Christian. Thanks for joining me.
Good to be here.
Tell us the titles of your books. Here's one.
Well, this book is about how to join an eco-village or an intentional community.
It's called Finding Community.
How to join an eco-village or intentional community.
But
and I wrote it specifically for folks who want to go out there and find their new community home. How to do it. What to do, what not to do.
Okay.
My first book is for the other side of the coin, how to start an intentional community. Creating a life together.
Creating a life together. Nice idea.
Practical tools to grow eco-villages and intentional communities.
Why don't we start at square one? What's an intentional community? What's an eco-village? So people have a sense of where we are.
Okay. An intentional community is where a group of people live with each other or next door to each other, or at least close enough, perhaps on shared land, perhaps on adjacent properties, to carry out their common purpose together. Their common purpose might be to have a really nice life here in the country with neighbors. It might be to be an artist collective here in the city. The range is very large. A co-housing community like Nevada City Co-Housing is an intentional community, in my view.
Sure.
An eco-village is a particular kind of intentional community, except eco-villages in the global south, which might be traditional indigenous villages. But in the industrialized north, most often, eco-villages are intentional communities which value and practice ecological sustainability, economic sustainability, and social, cultural, spiritual sustainability.
Which is, they're thinking about their whole lives.
Yes, yes. And they also very often have classes and workshops and tours, because they're not there for themselves. They're there to help change the culture. If we can do this, maybe others can do this. Let's learn what works. Let's teach others what we're learning.
And I can see that as we move forward with declining energy supplies and economic turbulence, sort of the middle-class dream of everybody having their own little house in the suburbs, all in our separate little pods, is not going to be as economically viable as it has been with cheap oil. So I would imagine that the intentional communities are giving us model. They're trying some stuff out for us.
I would say that's true. I would say that eco-villages in particular are like research labs, socially and culturally and ecologically and economically, for what our culture will need to grow more towards in the future. Maybe we can hold out some hope, some techniques, some methods, some inspiration.
So how does one go about finding an eco-village?
Well, the place that I would start and that I recommend people start is online. There is a wonderful website, directory.ic.org. It's so easy to remember because IC stands for Intentional Community. Directory.ic.org. One can look up communities by geographic area or by their name alphabetically. So if I was going to look up in California here, eco-villages, I'd go to California. I'd look at all of the, you can't necessarily tell by their name which ones are or are not eco-villages. So I would read the listing, then I would go look at their individual websites linked to by the listing and see what they have to say. Say, well, we're an aspiring eco-village, we're on 20 acres, there's just 4 of us to do this and to do this and to do this. Another might say, we've been here for a long time and we're doing this and this and this and we've accomplished this and we're hoping to do this. You can get a sense by what they're doing. There's a few other there's the Global Ecovillage Network website, which takes some navigating and guessing and being intuitive to get their directory, which is not very obvious. But when you do, you'll see all the same communities as on the directory.ic.org one, and perhaps a few more. You can also Google Ecovillage and then the location you're interested in and see what comes up.
And so the Ecovillage is not only here in North America, Europe?
More in Europe than here per
Really?
population. Oh,
Really?
the Europeans are way ahead of the US and Canada in terms of ecovillages, particularly Germany, Scandinavian countries, Italy.
So they're not all rural, is what I hear. They vary a lot.
Yeah, Ecovillage at Ithaca in upstate New York is just a 10-minute bike ride from downtown Ithaca, a university town. So it's kind of semi-rural. If you looked at it, you'd say it was rural, but it's rural. It's 175 acres, but there's neighbors all around. Los Angeles Ecovillage is right in the heart of downtown Los Angeles.
With apartment buildings and the whole thing. So
Yes,
it's just a group of people that decide I want to be in this, live together.
Yes,
it's
it's not a place where people own land. It's a place where people rent in 2 different apartment buildings particularly, but other apartments and rental units there. And what they do there is they're bicycle activists, $20 off on your rent if you don't own a car.
Right, yes.
Yeah. So they're doing what they can to be ecologically sustainable in a big city.
So when you've gone online and maybe narrowed the search, what's the next step?
Well, I would say it's to look at what do I want in terms of 5 factors and how do these communities match up. Ideally, you'd match what you want to the community and see if it's a good fit. If it was a fit that didn't fit, you'd say, well, they might be nice folks, but that's probably not a good fit. So the factors that I think are important are, what is their mission and purpose? Is that resonant with my own mission and purpose? Is where they're going and what they want to do, is that where I'm going and what I want to do? And also, is their lifestyle, their values, which is of course connected to their mission and purpose, is their lifestyle and their values like my lifestyle and my values? Is this a resonance? Do they want to do that and I want to do that? In which case, they might be fun to visit, but that wouldn't be a good match. Just like, oh, I don't know, Reginald might be fun to date, but we wouldn't want to marry him. Because really it's like getting married in a sense.
Of course it is.
You're going to put your fates together. Another aspect that's very, very important is, of course, location. For some people, the location is, oh, I'd really like to be close to my parents, and I'd like to be in a place that's nice and cold in the winter because I love to cross-country ski. For another person, it might be, I'd like to be in a place that's nowhere near my parents, and it's got to be warm, it can't be cold. So different people have different things they want.
Both social and geographical, I can hear, and weather and so on.
And climate and topography. I love evergreen trees. I like the dry summers of California, or I like evergreen trees. I like it to be the Pacific Northwest with all its mist and beauty. So people might have different preferences in terms of climate, topography, location. Next is what kind of economic plan do they have? Is it independent incomes? These are most ecovillages in the North America anyway, which is I pay my joining fee and I pay my community dues, but how I earn my money and what I do with it, how I save it, invest it, or spend it is entirely my own business. Okay. In my opinion, this is probably about 98% of all communities, perhaps more. But then there's income sharing communities where I work for a community business and then I get room and board and perhaps a stipend, or perhaps I put in a requisition for something that I want to get paid for, like I'd like to go on a trip and see my parents, and that'll cost $600. And yes, we write you a check for $600. That's a rural one where there are community businesses that you work for. An urban one, we just all go out and go to our different jobs, come home, put the money in a common pot, same thing. There are very few, but the difference is enormous in how it affects you.
Of course.
Because if you're sharing incomes, then how somebody else spends, saves, takes care of, or maintains or doesn't maintain your commonly owned property or equipment affects you quite a bit. So there's more connection, intimacy, meetings, and decisions and agreements. So it's more of an intimate because you're somewhat financially in bed together. So do I want income sharing or not income sharing, which is independent incomes? And can I afford to join? a different subject. Do they have a joining fee? Do they have a site lease fee or some kind of membership fee? Do they have annual dues and fees? Will I be able, if it's rural, to make enough income doing whatever I'm going to be doing there to meet these fees? And very closely associated with that, if it's rural, how will I make a living? How will I make a living really?
Because I bet that's a real cornerstone for
it's totally
all of
important. It's totally important because some people think, oh, what a beautiful community. I love how it looks and feels. Oh, I'll think about a job later. And that just doesn't work because that just means the community has high turnover with idealistic people who didn't do thinking before they got there. And now they're there with their PhD in engineering, and there's no need for a PhD in engineering here in this rural area. And any jobs that you can get in a small town, being a checkout clerk at the local supermarket, are already being taken by the people who already live there, the rural folks who all know each other. And so if you can telecommute, that makes you a good candidate for a rural community. If you have a mail order business and UPS or FedEx comes there, that's good. You have to think like that. Are there any employers near there? Do people in the community, various individuals or groups, have businesses that you might work for?
Like what?
At Earth Haven,
which is where you live.
Which is where I live, in the mountains of North Carolina. There's Red Moon Herbs. It's a women's herbal product business. All the employees are women. The owner is a woman, one of our Earth Haven members. And so various Earth Haven members can work part-time or full-time for Red Moon Herbs when there's an opening and if they can do that work. So it's possible to make a living with someone else's entrepreneurial skill and entrepreneurial risk, and you just become the wonderful, valued employee, ideally. And the last factor is size. Is it a very, very large community, 40, 50, 60 or more people? Is it a really small community, 7, 8, 9, 12 people? What a difference in how your community life is. In a small community, the presence of someone who's wonderful or someone who's disruptive makes a huge difference in the whole group. In a large community, not as much. In a small community, someone leaving who is disruptive can make everyone feel so much better. And someone leaving who's beloved and very helpful to everyone can demoralize the place because they're gone. So you get more intimacy, more family feeling in a small community, but
a little less social resilience in a way.
Yes, that's right. That's right.
We were fortunate to get to watch your slideshow last night, and I was interested to see that some of the intentional eco-villages, particularly in Europe, are little neighborhoods, even on the same land, so that people of sort of similar resonance, you know, can do the earth buildings if they want to, whereas the other folks who don't, or maybe all the folks with kids are in one section.
Yes, I can think
flexibility.
I can think of several eco-villages like that. Earth Haven, where I live, has 13 different neighborhoods, some of which are organizing in their own unique ways. And Siebenlinden in Germany has planned for multiple different communities of communities, different neighborhoods. And Damenhur in Italy, of course, has 20 different group homes of about 20 people each. And Dancing Rabbit in Missouri has sub-communities which they encourage so that people of like mind with like interests might join together and have their own sub-community. This way you get the intimacy of your best pals and the village life too.
That's really, I mean, it's really lovely to hear the different experiments that are happening. Yeah. Diana, thank you. This has been a wonderful conversation. Thanks for joining me.
Thank you, Janaea.
You're watching Peak Moment Conversations. I'm Janaea Donaldson, and my guest is Diana Leaf Christian. Thanks for joining us. Hi, welcome to Peak Moment. I'm Janaea Donaldson. My guest is Bob Banner, the publisher of Hope Dance. I asked Bob to say a few words about sacred activism. Unlike most conversations, you won't see me, but you'll hear me in the background. Enjoy.
Okay, the Sacred Activism workshop that I attended with Andrew Harvey, he had said, if you don't really know your purpose, one thing that you could do is like wake up at 3 o'clock in the morning and let the world's pain and suffering enter into you. And what really breaks your heart, is the thing that will sustain you, and that is what you ought to be doing. For him, it was the environment and animals. It just really breaks his heart. So for me, mine was like all of them, So I needed to get into media because so much was breaking my heart. But what also broke my heart is just the bad news all the time, the bad news. So when I came across some positive solutions, it inspired me so much. It actually felt like a chemical change, that something took over and said, you know, it wasn't just a temporary inspiration like you get from a movie, but this was like, I needed to tell the world that there were solutions out there, that they could do something, and that there was a sense of genuine hope, not the sentimental, sensational type of hope, but something really, really strong that affected my whole body, my whole being. So that's what turned me on. And so whatever breaks your heart, I think turns people on. And not necessarily breaks your heart, but what you really, really love. And sometimes breaking your heart is what you really, really love. But we're so afraid of feeling that grief of what, or we're so overwhelmed, but just pick one or two. What really breaks your heart that you just sob and let yourself sob until you go, I have to do something about this. Well, can I talk about sacred activism?
Sure, sure.
Okay, to me, the sacred activism is you've got your spirituality people on one end, and you've got your political, social justice on the other end. And a lot of times they don't meet. I've been doing this for years. I show spiritual films, and I only get the spiritual audience. I'll show a political film, and I only get the political audience. And I try in my discussions, you know, that they need to come together. So in Andrew Harvey's workshop, he was speaking about the fire of the spiritual people, the sense of the God-conscious flame, the fire that enlivens them, the pursuit for enlightenment or whatever. And you've got the fire of the social justice. They just, you know, and it's anger perhaps generated, which he doesn't necessarily have a problem with, and I don't either, because sometimes you need that anger to push you into doing something. And he says, but both of them by themselves are ineffective because nothing is really changing. You've got the social justice people battering themselves against the wall, not really being effective. You got the spiritual people off on retreats or whatnot into their own work or their own style and not being very effective. He says if the two of them could come together, he says that if the two fires could come together, it would be a third fire that would be like a nuclear bomb of love. And I think he's onto something. He's coming out with a book on sacred activism soon. He's got a website he's talking about. He's doing workshops on this. I think it's key, just like the key for science and spirit, just like the key between psychology and the environment, where you have deep ecology and eco-psychology. Whenever there's a third movement, it seems to be a lot more potent. Like you take the environmentalists and the business people and you create these local living economy, green businesses, you're opening a huge door where they've come together. So they're not at odds with each other anymore. So I think that's very, very key. And if we can see that it has been effective in certain collaborations, what other collaborations down the road that we think that they could never come together? You know, Republicans and Democrats, where's the commonality? Where's the link that they could come together and build a bigger force? Because we know we don't have a whole lot of time. So, you know, what are we doing? One film example of sacred activism is a film called Scared Sacred by Velcro Ripper. It's incredible. He goes around the world going to the hot spots. He goes to Bhopal, he goes to Afghanistan and Iraq, and he goes to Katrina. And he sees the people who have had the most suffering, the most pain. And a lot of times you would imagine that those people would have so much revenge. And yet some of those people have opened up a different dimension in their psyches to be so I don't know, enlightened or compassion or it's like a new breed of human that comes out of that incredible depth of suffering to come alive and be of real, genuine service. And that film, I wish everybody could see that. And he's actually working on a second documentary on sacred activism, because that's his major focus. He's a Buddhist guy, and he just combines it with social justice in such a beautiful, calm way.
And that may be what we're having ahead of us, is a lot of us going to be suffering different kinds of, our communities, this devastation from climate change, from oil, from whatever. So they're out front shaping a different response.
Yeah, and they can respond. Can you imagine people who've been taking all the various drugs, and all of a sudden the shit hits the fan? They're going to either commit suicide or just freak out. Who in the spiritual community is going to be so grounded and so calm to be able to move into those really critical times? I mean, who went to Katrina and dealt with the death and the dogs and the humans and all of that stuff? You know, we've got to become, you know, almost more than human to withstand. What gets me is like some of the peak oil people talk about die-off. Do they really know? Do they really embody what might be coming down the pike? They say die-off so, what's that word? So flippantly. And I go, who's going to take care of those people? Who are going to take care of all the people who don't want to live anymore because it's too painful? Americans have become so soft and obese. It's going to be, it's not going to be a pretty picture. And there's got to be humans who are going to be, if we want to be a birth of a new culture and have to deal with that kind of incredible transformation, we need to really work hard at it now. If I whimper because my friend hangs up on me, what am I going to do when my friends die or commit suicide, or there's no more water, or you know, the government hasn't done its job, or the media hasn't done its job to prepare us? You know, where am I going to go? Am I going to become just another herd that freaks out and is going to just be into that mob mentality? Or am I going to prepare now with people who have their consciousness changed and who are preparing in a really diligent and wise fashion? I mean, one of the things that Marshall Summers talked about is not necessarily jumping into solutions and answers, but really living with these questions. And I think that's really hard for people. How do you hold those questions in your heart, and hopefully an answer from the deep mind can emerge? We may not have that much time, but I think that's why I focused on the sacred, scared sacred film, because they were already in that incredible suffering point where something emerged from them. They didn't know, they didn't expect it perhaps, but something shifted.
Your notion of the picture I had was humans leaping to a whole different level of normal operating consciousness, really. And I think that's part of moving out of this adolescence, growing up, the rite of passage, however various people are talking about.
Right.
The next evolutionary stage for humans, you know, all the different phrases for it.
Right.
So when you think about how to be prepared on the inside, finding your passion, that's part of it, your heart. What kinds of things do you look at, do you turn to for, or think that people are doing, not necessarily you necessarily, but that are going to provide that kind of nourishment or fortification or centering? Emotionally, psychologically, spiritually prepared.
Well, that's the interesting thing about what breaks your heart. That can be one key factor. Also, friends, confidants. It was so important for me to have a confidant to talk to share. We need that immensely. We may not necessarily want to live with them or do co-housing or intentional communities, but to have confidants who really share our hearts, the reason why we're here, and then to have them be there for us if we need it. I think that's happening more and more. More people are coming together and talking about it. And seeing films like What a Way to Go. I mean, even though it's depressing, it really hits on some certain things that we haven't woken up to. And if you wake up to that, then you need to feel the grief. And hopefully out of the grief, you can come up with some ideas, some practical solutions, or just hang out with the grief. I mean, Joanna Macy talks about this, that you have to feel the grief in order to start moving towards some kind of empowerment. Why are we so afraid of grief? I mean, all the movies, when you see somebody crying, they're like this. Why are we ashamed of our grief? I've never seen a film where somebody's crying, open-eyed, face right at you, vulnerable as hell, showing you what they're feeling. Van Jones did it in a speech. I was blown away. He stayed with it. He didn't shy away from it. He was choking, but he stayed there. You don't see that very often, and it always moves me that somebody can be that vulnerable, your heart is open. Other people open their hearts to whoever opens their heart. Isn't that something? Talk about entrainment, so it always takes one person, or that all it takes is just one person to open up, and sometimes the whole room can open up. And you can feel that, and you can feel, what are you going to do with your life now that you've experienced such grief? Are you going to go back to your work and make something that's not essential? How are you going to live with yourself? Can we shut ourselves down so much and be in denial? Or somehow let that grief foster some kind of altercation in our psyche so that we can start shifting?